Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the back of a moving van. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got some League of Legends for you today, preview for the Spanish Grand Prix, some other topics that I'm sure we'll get into throughout the episode. But Justin,
in there,
as you said, from the back of a moving van into a new apartment and into a new pod setup. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. Good to see you. Good to see you in the new digs. For our audio listeners, we have a fresh new white background for Aaron. The TV is now off screen. He is in his own bedroom, and his partner has another bedroom very, very far away. Yeah, good to see you, Aaron.
Kicked her out of the apartment. She's off to the gym to get out of my slight bit of hair that I've got left here. So yeah, it's been cool, but I guess I can just get right into the rose, thorn, and seed for the week. The rose is related to the whole move and everything. Everything just generally went very smooth with the move. There were a couple hiccups here and there. A bad U-Haul review and a few hours later, but we're in, everything is good. So, and we love the new place. So definitely a positive there. Couple negatives with my thorn for this week. So I've got two thorns. One just happened, but the first one I'll get into, I did catch COVID this past week. So that, threw us for a loop with the move and everything. We ended up having some friends who were not able to assist as much with the move just due to concerns of family health, different things like that. So it just was bad timing, unfortunately, and all. But we, like I said, it worked out. So that was a bummer, but I am doing just fine at this point, and so hanging in there. Nice. But my other thorn is what I had messaged you about to some extent about why I needed to start a few minutes later, potentially, which was I was selling furniture from my old place and I had to go to the apartment to tear it down and everything. Welp, it was a scam. I posted the stuff on Facebook Marketplace last night. Someone responded super quick, was like hitting me up like, oh yeah, like I'll come by, pick it up and everything. I'm like, dope. This is awesome. Like less than 30 minutes and I've already sold it for like basically what I was asking for. I'm like, cool. I get to my apartment, like start taking the bed apart, doing all this stuff, getting it all ready to be picked up. And I'm like, hey, message the person. I'm like, hey, like, just got home. Like, are you close by? Like, this is the time that we kind of set and all. I'd given them my address already. And I was like, oh, and by the way, like, how do you want to do payment? And they're like, oh, like, I'm like, do you want to do Venmo, Cash App, like, whatever? And the guy's like, like, I'll do Zelle. And Zelle is not as commonly used, but I know people who use it where, like send money, it goes directly to the person's bank account and all. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm sitting there, I don't get any notification or any Gmail or whatever. The guy messages me back on Facebook and he's like, oh yeah, I just sent the money. He's like, check your email, see if you got like the notification. And I like check my email, nothing there. Like, I'll refresh your email, check your spam folder maybe. Like, check my spam folder, and there are two emails in there, and I open them, and they both are, like, the same thing. One, words are misspelled in the title of the email. Like, and it basically is saying that, oh, like, there's a limit with, like, how much money can be sent to you because you're not a business, so you have to verify and blah, 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 blah. And basically it like the guy's like, oh, it says I have to verify. It says that I need to send an extra $150. If I send that, will you send it back? And that'll verify blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
this is
Right.
BS. I'm like, I picked up on it. I had the nose for it on this occasion and was like, nah, this seems shady. So I look and the key for anyone out there to avoid any sketchy stuff like this, look at what email address any of these things are coming from. This email address was like zellservice.pay@aol.com. And I am like, there is no way that this is real. Like Zell, this giant company that sends money back and forth with banks and all this stuff, is not using an AOL email address. I'm like, get out of here. So I blocked and reported the account. Like, but wasted a little bit of time. So now I'm gonna have to relist the furniture, hopefully get it sold and all. But I'm like, goddamn, waste of time, waste of energy. Like, they got me all excited and then made me waste time calling PNC to verify that there was nothing like pending for my account, just to double check. Because worst thing that I would feel bad if I like block the guy and whatever, and there is a pending thing like coming into my account for whatever reason. But I'm like, there's no way. And the PNC person's like, yeah, they're like, it's a scam. We've gotten a bunch of calls about it. I'm like, yep, like sounds about right. So that is my my long-winded thorn, but hopefully I can sell this furniture. The seed for this week was Colleen's brother and sister-in-law had their baby, and so now, yeah, very exciting. And I'm kind of excited because this is like Colleen has 2 nieces already, and I think they're great. They're awesome, like little girls. But I feel like I've only been in their lives for such a short time, and so like the thought of this new baby and everything, and me like hopefully at least being around from like the get-go and being there to kind of always be seen as like an uncle is a really cool idea in my mind. So I've always like wanted to be the cool uncle more than like anything else. So
Funkle Aaron,
hell yeah. So I'm excited about that. It'll be cool once I'm clear and everything from this this sickness and illness. I will hopefully get to see the baby not too long after and everything. I've seen plenty of pictures and all, and it's a cute baby. But yeah, that's my seed. It's a exciting kind of long-term thoughts that I was having. So
sure, you want to be the Funkle in their lives for many days to come, eh?
Yep, hoping that's the case. So
that's pretty cool.
So yeah, good things with the thorn, not so good things, but life is good in general. So Justin, how's your week been? Tell me about it. What do you got?
My week has been pretty good. I just wanted to shout out listener Tyler. He was sad to see you go and was just thinking all that noise in the background was useful. So just wanted to shout out your roommate. And yeah, he was obviously sad to see you go, so that was pretty funny.
He's already been over a couple times, so he's gonna be around. That
is some attachment right there. That's a good pal. Anyway, my rose, thorn, and seed here for the week, pretty simple here. The lady at Truist, who I've decided I'm just gonna call her desk directly. She said that the number I had went straight to her desk. I was like, I'm just going to call you for everything we need from now on.
What is Truist? Explain briefly.
It's the bank. It's BB&T
okay, gotcha.
and SunTrust combining. Cool. And they came up with Truist.
Banking.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's basically National Penn Bank went to BB&T, and then they conglommed with somebody else. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This Heather lady, she was super helpful. In like 24 hours, she got me my cash, which previously was taking like 4 weeks, which, I'm sure you had heard about. So yeah, she was super understanding. She was even like laughing at the way I was telling the story. So it was pretty good. But yeah, got the cash. That's my rose. My thorn, I'm a big old pussy. We were, yada, yada, yada. I had cut up my hand a little bit and I get sweaty. I get hot. I'm like, oh, no. Oh, I'm like, I'm feeling faint, and I've always been that way. Just weak stomach, blood. It just does not sit well with me.
What'd you do?
I just like cut up my finger a little bit, and it was just bleeding.
Just like cutting a piece of fruit, or like getting stuff ready for dinner, or.
Oh, we were cleaning. I cut it on some glass. It was like no big deal. It was just like
gotcha.
a little guy.
Little scratch, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just like a super pussy. I'm like damn near passed out. Like, it was bad. So I hate myself for that. It's a terrible quality. My seed this week is actually I'm excited for you and Colleen's move. I think it's a big step in your life. It's a big step in the relationship. I think it's great. And then the back half of that thought is thinking a little what would you say? What's the word? Selfishly, where it's like, I think it'll be better for the pod. I'm happy you're in a better space. Maybe it opens up the way for like more in-person race companions. Maybe it'll open just a bunch of different options that maybe we didn't have before at the apartment. So my seed this week was I was super excited for the move. Sorry that I wasn't able to come down with the COVID. But I don't want your Funkle anywhere near me. But yeah, that's my Rose Thorn seed for the week. And let's talk about some Spanish Grand Prix. Let's talk about some race cars.
Yeah, well, getting into just some general intro stuff, I wanted to first ask you, did you get to see the BBC question time that they had Sebastian Vettel on?
No.
So
although I heard them talking about it, I heard he was quite the gentleman. Go ahead and tell me about it.
Yeah, so just very well spoken. It was really kind of an interesting thing because Seb has been a big advocate for a lot of things in terms of environmentalism and things like that. He wore a shirt to the Miami Grand Prix that said like Miami Grand Prix 2060 first Grand Prix underwater or something like that, like talking about the rising oceans and global warming that could potentially put the beaches of Miami and many other areas under a lot of water. And so it was kind of it was interesting, like from the perspective, because these pundits on BBC were basically asking, they're like, well, you drive in Formula One. That's one of the most like kind of wasteful in terms of like fuel and things like that sports that there are. Like, isn't that kind of hypocritical? And he's like, yeah, like it kind of is. He's like, it's just something like that I have always loved is racing and driving cars. But he's like, it does make me kind of think because we're flying and traveling all over the world and having our vehicles shipped everywhere and like using all of these fuel and resources and everything. He's like, it is kind of feel hypocritical and all. And he's like, but this is what I love to do. And I'm still trying to kind of balance that out with my efforts, like environmentally and all. It was just, it was really well spoken, really well said. Like, I think it was a cool side of Seb to see because we so often just see these racers, kind of like how for the Miami Grand Prix, I talked about Lewis and him meeting with local school kids that are also black and talking to them about being the only black person in F1 really, and like how it kind of feels to be in that position and all. So seeing Seb like and just different racers outside of that normal environment was kind of a cool little look into them as people, a little bit more than just as like drivers. So I thought that was a really neat little segment that I got to see and hear Seb kind of answer some questions and chat. So
yeah, that's super interesting. I'll have to check that out. I think it's very in line with what we know about Seb. I remember the B boxes that he set up. Where was that? Was that in Hungary or Norway or somewhere? But I know when he got to the track, he spent time setting up a local habitat. I think it was for honeybees. That is very cool.
Yeah, so he did it was at the Red Bull Ring or like
Gotcha.
in that area.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So that's super cool. Obviously, somebody who's very environmentally minded. And yeah, to your point, we get to see him be in a position where he's challenged with a pretty good point. It sounds like he handled it quite well and in a diplomatic way that shows like, yeah, he understands that position, but also he's like, well, we are racers and that is what we do. However, I would kind of argue that yes, maybe the environmental cost is pretty high, but is there not some kind of something gained by these countries that participate on the global stage, right? There's got to be so much benefit to it that like
there's a huge economical benefit, and I think from Seb's perspective too, he like talked about it as he's like, we are also entertainers. He's like, whatever value you want to put on that, like we're out here performing racing to entertain the masses essentially. Right. And like he's like, there's a certain kind of value that people put on that as well. So I think it was finding the balance between like the different parts of him and how he feels. It was cool to see, but also just the fact that he was doing all these interviews in his second language, being English. Like he's obviously not a native English speaker. He speaks German as his first language. It was just very, very impressive to see. Like, not that I had any questions about Seb's ability to speak English, but like to have that in depth and well thought out of a conversation and everything in a language that's not your first language, like that's pretty cool. So
yeah, for sure. There's something to be said if that was like the only racing series left in the world and they were like, no, we are going to burn this fuel. We're going to race around these circles. Like then it's a compelling question of like, well, you're just supposed to stop racing. Like everybody else did. Right. But there's a million racing series in the world. So to single F1 out in that way is a bit disingenuous. But I understand the overall point. The other thing I would like to say is, well, fuck, now I just lost my point. We can move on, and I'll think about it 3 hours from now.
Sounds good.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, well, leading into the Spanish Grand Prix, then there were a couple things that came out just over the past week or so. But Ferrari has decided to start tinkering into the little mind games and political battle in F1. It's starting off a little early, I think, but they reportedly are preparing a dossier of what they are estimating all the other teams' expenses have been thus far this season due to R&D upgrades, things like that, and they're going to present it to the FIA, basically as a kind of I think, initial little trying to throw a little mud at Red Bull and see if it sticks, in terms of following along and figuring out where these teams are in terms of the budget cap and all. So, so Ferrari, I think, from a lot of things that I've read over the past week, it seems like Mattia Binotto, the team principal for Ferrari, has some beliefs that Red Bull has used a lot of their budget cap. Helmut Marko, Christian Horner have basically said, no, we're probably right about where they are, especially after Carlos Sainz's crashes that have caused all these.
I was just about to say that. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Why is that Ferrari?
So Ferrari is so they're trying to throw some stuff out there. They want to highlight the different expenses that teams have used for upgrades and whatnot, because they think that, I don't know, maybe they think the FIA isn't keeping track of the money people are spending. It's just one of those political games. It's to force Red Bull to have to provide the FIA with documentation of stuff that's going to end up being just a hassle and kind of a mind game. That's what it overall ends up being. But also from the Ferrari side, there was a kind of note that I saw on Twitter that basically said that Ferrari originally planned to use 4 power units for the season for both of their drivers, as opposed to 3 that are allotted. So at some point down the road, just already there's the expectation that later on in the season, Carlos and Charles will have to take grid penalties for the new power units, the 4th ones. And that, of course, is if there's also no power units needed due to additional crashes and things like that. I'm pretty sure Red Bull ended up having with Max last year. So.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, is Ferrari just calling the FIA or calling the teams on a rule that was put in place? I'm sure the FIA has ways of tracking that spending data and making sure that if there's overspending, slaps on the wrist happen, the right people are talked to. I'm curious if, like you were saying, there's a power play from Ferrari in the sense of like we say in Magic the Gathering, make them have it. You play out the game-winning card as though they don't have the counter spell, because you hold it back, you're going to lose the game. So maybe it's Ferrari's way of saying I hope you guys are keeping track. Look, we were supposed to be look at the cost cap. It sounds like that kind of thing, but I think fucking hilarious where Carlos finishes 2 out of the last 5 races, 3 out of the last 5 races, and he's putting that gearbox into the wall, and it's Ferrari that are how much are you guys spending, as as a pile of money just burns in the back.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that's just funny about the situation is they are, and I think it is a little to some extent that, but also I think it's a way that by lodging this kind of formal issue with the FIA, I think that the ideal situation for them is for all the other teams to have to essentially provide the FIA with what their expenditures are. And because then it would most likely, there would have to be some sort of ruling or statement from the FIA because this formal thing was lodged. Then all of a sudden Ferrari is able to know where they stack up compared to, I think that might be part of it too. To
a little bit of data gathering.
A little bit, and kind of forcibly doing that. So
interesting.
So it's an interesting mind game, but But yeah, I think that the mind games and the political battles are starting to get played a little bit. I also just sent you that tweet regarding with the combined pictures of the Mercedes and Red Bull car, just because I thought that was super interesting. Someone on the Formula One Reddit, so Guild Flint, made a combined picture of the Red Bull and Mercedes car half and half down the middle, so that you can kind of see the differences between the vehicles. And it's so tough to see how different, like, you can see differences between the cars. I feel like when you're watching the races and all, like you definitely, between the vented sides or the big side pods, like you can tell that these cars are different.
Yeah.
But seeing it side by side like that, I was like,
oh, it's drastic.
Extreme. Like, I never would have imagined in the slightest that there was that much of a difference between those two cars, even with the huge difference in side pods and all. And so looking at that and looking at the different kind of features, it really does intrigue me that Mercedes is so all in on this no side pod car and everything, especially with all the issues that they've had thus far in terms of the porpoising and just like loss of speed in general. I think that's more of a power unit issue, but it's just, it is shocking how drastically different these cars are. And it's like a really like kind of cool, but also just like odd thing about an F1 season right after some huge rule changes, I think.
Well, and it's crazy. That's the thing where it's also the vehicle that is seemingly the most unreliable on the grid, where a couple of these tracks have seemed to suit them better, but overall, like you were alluding to, like they're having a lot of problems. And obviously I'm an expert engineer. I've built an F1 car before, so I know what I'm talking about. The side pods just seem like not the way to go, and especially when you look at every other team solution, like you're looking at the team that just won the world championship. They literally had the best team, the best car, and now they come into this season, and it's weird to see them going such a different route.
Yeah.
And different is cool, like if it's working out, but it is not doing so hot for them.
Yeah, and I think that the like really interesting part about that is to like the fact that they are, so like looking at these two cars, the Red Bull and the Mercedes, they are the two top teams from last season. And like to see them both go in such drastically different directions, it's just really intriguing. It's like, well, someone's seeing something and really, really believes in this car and this style for the Mercedes. Like, it does kind of ask the question of like, well, if they figure this out and all, like how much, if they can cut down on the porpoising, if they can figure out some of these other issues that they have with downforce and all, like how much faster can that car get with that aero package? Because that is so much more, like very obviously so much more aerodynamic than having these giant side pods on the side of the car. Like it's sleeker, it's slimmer, it's going to be more aerodynamic, but that's if they can figure out these other issues that are caused by that change. So
right.
It's like
and they can't even use other teams' data. Like they can't even see like, oh my god, I always do this, dude.
People at home are seeing me in huge big screen, and he's back.
There we go. Yeah, I don't get oh my god, that totally derailed me. What I'm trying to say is it it may prove to like not be faster. I see what you're saying, but like the Ferrari right now, the quickest on the grid, they're using that spoon shape that a bunch of the other cars have done. I think over the course of the season, I think that spoon shape is going to be the way that teams really get pace on the tracks.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see the Mercedes continue to struggle unless they're able to make like some large change to the side pod. And I'm not sure if you can at this stage in the season.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. I'm kind of wondering if they're this committed to it because they've spent a lot of their R&D and their budget cap on like making this work. So I don't know. Like it's possible that this is not possible. That this style of car, removing the side pods, removing the additional or like changing the airflow around the vehicle, like will always cause these issues. Like that is also a possibility. And so it's just it's a really interesting thing to look at, and just seeing the cars side by side, I was like, that is wild how different they are. And it makes it really interesting to see and just kind of continue to watch throughout the season. I saw some little bit loony kind of Mercedes fans on Twitter, which cracked me up a little bit. They're like, they went full conspiracy theory about it, and they're like, well, what if Mercedes has just been sandbagging for the past 5 races so that they can get really far behind and then just like blow everyone out of the water and win every single race for the rest of the season and win the world championship again? And I'm like, guys, like Toto's not someone who just tanks on purpose. Like they talk like they're tanking in the preseason testing and all, and they like have always tried to.
You're supposed to,
but yeah, like they've always tried to push the focus onto other people early on, but like they're not intentionally like, George, drive the car slower so that like it looks even crazier when we come back and win. Like why it doesn't I was like, these people are crazy. I'm like, I know there's some fanatical F1 fans out there, but I'm like, these guys are just like, they're a little up there. So it was an entertaining aspect, I guess, of looking into the Mercedes vehicle a little bit and all.
Sure. And it's something we've talked about before, like especially at the beginning of the season and the first couple of races. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but you're right. Being able to see them up close and right next to each other and done in that way, it does re-illuminate the issue and makes you see like, oh my God, yeah, they really went a different way, and it kind of speaks to some of the issues that they've been having. However, we are talking about it as though it's doomsday, as though they're 19th and 20th on the grid.
No,
I mean, George Russell literally got a podium. Lewis is still driving pretty well. He's still hungry, obviously. So they haven't built a bad car, just a baffling car, right?
Right. Like the ceiling for this car might be lower than others by doing this like unique style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The hope is that the ceiling is way up there and all, but until they fix these problems, like if that's possible, like the car's got its limits right now. And so, I mean, they have 2 of the best drivers on the grid. Like I would 100% say that George and Lewis are both top 5 drivers on the grid. Like there's no doubt in my mind about that. And yet and I think that is,
I don't agree with that.
You don't think so?
No, I think it's easily ahead of him. Lando, Max, Fernando, and Sergio. I think they're all better drivers than him.
Really? I was gonna say Max, Charles, Lando, Lewis. George.
And Charles is up there too.
Well, I was gonna say, and I had George in there. Like, I think I don't know. Either way, like
with
I don't
Seb, Fernando on the grid, and Valtteri, it's really tough to say that this really young kid is like top of the chaff. Like Fernando has won some insane races.
Oh yeah, and I'm not saying overall like
you just mean like right
I
now?
mean current best drivers on the grid who are like driving their vehicles as like well as possible, and I still think Lewis is driving like I don't think I'm not saying that like all time like best driver or anything like that, because then like last year no one would say that Kimi was one of the best drivers on the grid based on his recent seasons, but I do like multiple world champion and phenomenal driver in his own right, Kimi Räikkönen, like
sure
there. So I'm talking about like this season.
Yeah, so George is getting the most out of that vehicle,
right?
Although like if you were giving them like the FIFA score, I think George would be like a 94 or a 93, something real solid, but I think there'd be a couple drivers ahead of him.
I think it's more that in my
That's how
mind,
FIFA scores it, right?
Yeah, it's out of 100. Yeah. So I think in my mind, it's just the ability to drive it without like he hasn't made errors, which is why he's finished top 5 every race so far this season. And that's a good point. I do still think that Lewis is like a top 5 driver on the grid. Mm-hmm. I think he's just had like some moments in qualifying that he's just struggling. I can imagine. And so this is something that I've also thought about a lot, thinking about the grid and how especially Mercedes has been doing since they're third compared to how well they've done in the past like 10 years or
right.
8 years or whatever. George was very used to driving kind of a not that good car with Williams.
Yeah, big time.
So even this difficult to drive Mercedes car is still probably easier for him to drive than that Williams car was.
Okay.
I think that this is still a step up, even though it's not the most easy Mercedes car to drive that they've had.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas Lewis was driving this car that seemed to just be absolutely tuned to his every single muscle and movement, and so like locked in that now going to a car that is a bit more difficult to drive, I can imagine that going from a very smooth and easy car to drive for him to this new car is a huge difficult adjustment because he's fighting it more. He's having to deal with these other issues that he didn't previously have to. Mm-hmm. Whereas for George, he's like, I had just this Williams box that I managed to get up the grid a couple times and figure it out. He's like, this Mercedes thing's easy. Like,
just like another day at the office kind of feeling.
I feel like it's that that adaptability that comes with being forced to adapt to these like worse cars over the past few years, where like if you're in a consistently really good car like Lewis has been, that all of a sudden the drop in performance and in drivability has to feel much more dramatic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me.
So not knocking Lewis or anything, like that's why I still rate him extremely highly. But in general, we are going into, and we have yet to talk about the Grand Prix coming up this weekend. We've got the Spanish Grand Prix. Last year it was pretty uncompetitive, as you and I were kind of talking about before the episode, where all the drivers were significantly distanced from each other as they finished. Max finished 15 seconds behind Lewis. Valtteri was another 11 seconds behind him. Charles 30 seconds behind. Checo another 9 behind him. It was very like segmented. So I'm kind of curious to see if that is going to be the same this year at this track, but also just in general to see how these cars kind of do with the track in their new layouts and kind of as they're figuring out, like we've been talking about, the different intricacies of these cars and how they work.
Well, a couple thoughts about the Spanish Grand Prix last year. It was, I would say more on the technical side than it was like a really racy race. Obviously, we had the great start from Max, got Lewis on the start, and then it was one of the tire strategy races where Mercedes got the better of Red Bull, like on a timing thing. But towards the end, Lewis was chasing down Max. And the only thing I wanted to highlight there was this is one of the races where we heard Bono on the radio, like giving him that just really concise, where he's like, I think he said 21-second gap. It's nothing we haven't done before. And Lewis was just like after it, right? And you see that where it's not the encouraging words that made Lewis able to do that. It's this synergy between the two that promotes a driving style that is like they're obviously believing in each other in a certain way. So we do see Lewis get the hunt, get the overtake, and gets the job done. So I think from that perspective, it's quite an exciting race. It's one of the ones where we see Lewis like really at his best, hunting and looking for the thing that was previously taken. So yeah, I think that was a highlight of the race, was seeing Lewis kind of at his best. Another highlight was Ricciardo was doing pretty well towards the front of the pack. So one of the highlights of, Ricciardo's recent races. But yeah, other than that, it was just like a tire strategy race. But I do have to say, I thoroughly enjoy Catalunya as a track. I think it's pretty fun. I like the layout.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think it's a really great layout. You've got the really long straight on the back half and everything. You've got a couple of nice straights and fast sweeping turns too. So some really nice opportunities for some passing, having kind of some of the inside out turns where someone can get the inside and then end up getting repassed on the way back. Is always interesting. And I think that we'll probably see some really good driving and competition in the midfield. Valtteri drove a really clean race last year here, put himself in a very easy third position. So I wouldn't be surprised.
P3 quali, P3 finish.
I mean, he did his Valtteri thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think in the Alfa Romeo and with how he's been performing so far this year, I would not be shocked to see him have a nice race this weekend, and I hope to. I enjoy seeing Valtteri. I have like really pulled a full 180 on my early Valtteri opinions when we started the podcast. I had a decent bit of negativity towards him, and I love to see him do well now. So hopefully we'll get to see a good performance from him. Yuki DNF'd last year, so hopefully he'll be able to put in a good race and have a nice weekend as well. So lots of good stuff to look forward to.
Well, to your point about being turned around on Valtteri, I'll say this about the Aston Martin driver, Stroll, where I previously did not rate him very highly. We saw that one race. Was it? I forget what race it was, but he had like an insane qualifying lap that just shouldn't have happened. I believe he started at the front of the grid. I don't know if he was P1 or what got him up there. Maybe it was even a safety car restart or some kind of jank that put him at the front. Maybe it was actually at Monaco one year. I may be misremembering details. Anyway, Lance Stroll just spinned this race horribly. He was at the front and just could not, like, you could tell he was like way under pressure. And ever since then I was like, fuck Lance Stroll, he's not even that great. But recently I think his qualifying performances are great. His races, he does okay. Obviously I think he has some of the most like close calls. He's obviously like not checking his mirrors to a certain degree, but I have to say, to your point of like, and maybe being too hard on somebody, I was definitely pretty hard on Lance Stroll. Obviously I hate seeing him not looking in his mirrors, but you know.
I think it's just the I think he has these really good flashes of performance and everything, but overall I think he is generally just a relatively averagely consistent driver. Like, I think he is kind of, this is what you get when you have Lance Stroll as driver. You get general consistency, like some good competitive nature, some good performance, but overall he's never going to be that superstar driver necessarily, and that's okay too. There are a number of guys on the grid like that. Nick Latifi is one who always stands out to me as consistency. Like, he is Mr. Consistent. It's not gonna be super high ceiling, and like his best performances will only get him so far, but you don't necessarily ever see him just like, other than the occasional crash, which every driver has, his have just been more pronounced, I think, over the past couple of years because of the situations. Like, he's just kind of, he does his thing. He drives the way that you expect him to pretty consistently. He's not wowing people. He's not super like getting after people on the racetrack, but he does his job. He comes in and tries to drive his best race. Whereas you have someone who like George or Alex Albon, I think in general have a lot more skill and talent as drivers who are next to him. And those are the guys that you're like, yeah, I expect this guy to kind of reach and stretch for the, like, hey, maybe it'll bite them in the ass. Maybe they'll reach too far. Albon has had multiple crashes that he had with Lewis back when he was in Red Bull that were especially the one in, I believe it was Brazil, was due to just him being too aggressive, like going a little too hard. Lewis drove as close to the limit as he could, and they bumped and Albon lost it. So it was like you have a driver like Albon or like George who you're seeing these, like, they have that potential for these really standout performances, whereas Stroll, Latifi, some of those guys are just Mr. Consistent a little bit.
Well, I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, is maybe Lance Stroll has the potential to be a little more than Mr. Consistent.
I think he has those moments, but he doesn't typically have like really bad performances. And so I think we were like definitely taking some of those finishes that we were looking at and taking them a little out of context and looking at it and being like, this is not good. This guy's a bad driver. And yeah, I think we probably stretched a little too far with that. So
yeah, I can agree. But yeah, like you were alluding to, a lot of pretty interesting storylines leading into the Spanish Grand Prix. Future pretty cloudy for McLaren though yet. I think Lando is their shining light. I know there was a little talk from Daniel Ricciardo about retirement. There's, obviously he's got the contract for 23, but past that, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get some more data here.
Yeah, and I think that if he does retire, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad decision, just in the sense that with Red Bull, he felt like he had run its course and had done everything he could with the team. He went to another team that he was hoping would give him that kind of final opportunity as a like young, talented driver to win the world championship, and he didn't get there with Renault. He didn't get there now with McLaren, and so he's kind of at a spot where he's like, "Hey, I've had a really good career. Do I want to?" It kind of depends what he wants to do, or like what his passion is. Like, I know for someone like Kimi, driving for a less good team for a number of years was perfectly fine because Kimi just loved to drive. It was his hobby.
Right.
Like, he said it multiple times. With Daniel, I think he seems to be someone who has a lot of other things that he enjoys just in general in life, and it seems to be a pretty fun-loving person. So whether that's still having a seat in F1 or pursuing other things, I think that that's just a decision that it would very potentially be different from someone like Kimi or like Fernando Alonso, or like these other guys who are like, yep, we've done it, but we still love to do it. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see that, as opposed to Daniel just being like, oh, I'll take a drive at a lower team just to like keep it going. It seems like his passion is he wanted to win, and he's pushed to win, and he's tried to get there and just hasn't quite been able to do it. And that just happens sometimes. Sometimes there's just a better guy when you're at your best. Like, that's the way it goes.
Well, and for someone like Daniel, I think you're young enough where, Formula One doesn't have to be the only thing there is. I'm sure he could step off the grid and have like 1,000,001 opportunities
absolutely.
to, live out. I don't want to use the word fantasies, but like he can indulge any idea that he has, kind of thing. And that's, I love that idea for an individual more than like,
well, especially someone like him with so much personality and so much like just
a smile like that, dude. Honestly,
he's an entertaining dude. So yeah, I feel you.
So yeah, just I just brought that up for the other top teams, but that was something that's been in the air recently. So I just figured I'd bring that one up. Overall, yeah, not too many other things. I think the only other two drivers that I wanted to mention, obviously Alonso, but Esteban Ocon. Obviously, I think he's been doing a really good job. His recent results have been quite impressive. So another one that I'm looking forward to seeing at the Spanish Grand Prix this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. And he's in the top 10 for the Drivers' Championship this year. So he's still being able to put in some good performances and all.
Yeah, for sure.
Has definitely been a nice standout as well. Another younger driver who is putting it out there. So definitely hope to see Ocon continue to put out some good drives. So that should be fun. We've got, like we said, the Spanish Grand Prix coming up this weekend, starting on Friday with the with the practices and everything, getting into qualifying on Saturday, and the race on Sunday.
Now, did you catch the IndyCar race at all this weekend?
So I did. I think I watched like the entire thing, actually. I was like, there were a couple times where I was like, am I going to turn it off? But then there was a crash and a safety car, and I was like, all right, I'm going to keep watching, see what happens.
Right. So, well, and I didn't want to, I don't want to stick on it long. I did want to bring that up to you. There was a lot of going off, and one of the notes I have here is IndyCar's good in wet ? And like, it almost seemed like none of these drivers had ever been in the rain before. They didn't know what water was. They were confused what was happening. It was hilarious.
Wild because like, and so for those of you who didn't see it, the GMR Grand Prix that happened this past weekend in IndyCar it was raining the entire time. There was rain before the race that delayed it slightly. They ended up getting out there. The track slightly dried up in some spots, but was wet in others. The wet tires. I think they need intermediates. I think that was my conclusion from watching this, because these cars were on the wet tires and were experiencing extreme tire degradation and deterioration, like on the wet tires, because there were parts of the track that were dry and the deg was just brutal on those parts. But then when you see drivers like out there on slicks, it was like they were on ice skates, like just like a 5-year-old at the ice rink, just slipping and sliding everywhere. I mean, we saw Colton Herta early on in the race. We saw him drift, one of the like hardest, kind of most badass, like looking slow-mo drifts as you could see. This guy's just sliding around this turn and manages to hang on. Could easily have just binned it right there.
Honestly, I watched that replay. I watched his onboard of that. It must have been like 10 or 12 times where I ran it back. I was like, what the fuck? My man's hands, for him to like get it back around and locked into where
he
like,
just kind of let it go for a bit, and then it was like, all right, now is the time. Like he knew the exact time to like. It was
crazy. Like his hands were so fast and so solid. I was like, oh my god. But yeah, that was just that was a crazy race. So many people spinning, so many people going off. The thing that I thought was go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially with the spinning and going off, we saw towards the end 3 drivers stick on the slick tires with the rain. One being Roman Grosjean, but the guy who was leading the race, which I'm blanking on who that was. I think it was Scott McLaughlin.
Okay.
Ends up spinning out and losing all these, like lost, I think like 8 places under safety car.
Mm-hmm.
We saw 3 drivers not switch to the wets to hopefully like get this advantage and hope for the track to dry up. And man, like they all were spinning out under safety car. It was a wild like end to that race.
Well, and it reminded me of, I forget where it was. Maybe it was Interlagos at some point recently where it was really raining, but the track was drying out. And I think it was Seb who was like, here, let me try the slicks. And he barely got around.
He made like one lap
race.
And then just like pitted him.
He's like, yep, I'm coming in. And it gave me like big Seb vibes from there. But yeah, and just our connection. Unfortunate to see Grosjean not do so hot. He was up there for a good while, but finished pretty poorly.
Well, it was due to, I think he got hit by Lundgaard. I forget.
I think you're right.
I think that's, and the driver. So that's the other thing that I just wanted to briefly mention. Man, do those announcers seem to not like Grosjean? Like they talk shit on him a lot based on him like bumping. They were like before the race. I was watching the pre-race show a little bit, and they
bring back his little fishtail and bump.
They talked about that. They're like, oh yeah, so like
scumbags.
They had Graham Rahals, like they showed a clip of like them, like someone grilling Graham about that contact and everything, and Graham being like, hey, we move forward, we move on, like it's driving, like these things happen, like it's in the past, like I'm looking forward to the next like race kind of thing. And like the political good, like I mean proper answer, like drivers aren't intentionally trying to hit each other, like that's a stupid thing to say that they said on the broadcast for that race. But then they're talking about how Grosjean, they're like, oh yeah, Grosjean's really brought the name for himself over from F1, and a lot of the drivers seem to think that, oh, that's the Roman Grosjean, the crashing out and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, guys, like fucking chill a little bit. Like, and then he's driving as close to the edge as he can, basically, gets hit out, and they're like, oh, Grosjean was getting real aggressive there. And I'm like, what the fuck, guys. I'm like,
yeah.
they 100% are biased against him. And like, I don't think it's extreme. I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. They can say whatever the fuck they want. Like, they're the ones getting paid to commentate on IndyCar. Like,
right.
But I just find it so entertaining to see, like, to watch it, because watching Roman and knowing, like, the kind of driver he is, like, he was driving a shitbox Haas for multiple years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was in a bad car, crashes and stuff like that. Or, like, even in the pre-race show, they not only did they show the Graham Rahal incident where he bumped him twice and they were like, he's doing it on purpose. Like,
right.
They also showed when he was on a hot lap and went into the back of Takuma Sato, and it was like, that's on his pit crew to tell him, hey, you're coming in at 180 miles an hour. These cars up ahead of you are packed in and not moving at this corner.
Oh, like, dude, yeah.
Like, they still...
That's not on the driver at all,
They still threw that at him, and it's like, this man's going 180 around a track. Like, you can't expect him to be able to... Like, even if he had tried to slow down...
He just would have hit somebody else.
Well, and he did try to slow down, but even if he had done it sooner, he still would have nailed someone. Right. Like, he's on a hot lap. His goal is to, like, in F1, the cars usually get out of the way when someone's coming. They have someone in their ear going, hey, Grosjean's on a hot lap, get out of the way.
Right.
And Grosjean, like, he's probably in that mindset too. I was just like, in general, I was like, these announcers are fucking characters, because I'm just like, they are just like, they pick this storyline and they are sticking to it. But,
right.
But nonetheless,
there is merit in a broadcast in painting a villain sometimes. So,
but he's also, they've talked about him as being like a fan favorite in IndyCar too.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's weird. Also probably just due to, like, a lot of the fans who are following him in IndyCar are probably also F1 fans. So
yeah, I mean, that's the only reason yeah, exactly. Yeah. Obviously, I found merit outside of his name at this point. I found things that, are kind of interesting. But yeah, the one thing I wanted to ask you about on the broadcast, they said that it was they had considered it the most difficult Indy race ever. I thought that was kind of fascinating, where it was like, wait, it's like barely raining here. Like, what the fuck? You guys are weenies.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that they do not have... Well, one, I think to some extent I understand it, because they have 7 more cars on the grid than they do in F1.
Big time,
so I think that there's a lot more potential for these incidents and all. Plus, IndyCar races are longer. They have more laps. They have more, like, just distance in general is longer. They had 85 laps on this track. So I do understand some of the differences that cause some things to be considered, like, more difficult. But in general, like, I didn't think, like you said, I don't think that this was that out there. And it made me just wonder, like, why do they not have an intermediate tire? They were like, oh, they're either on wets. Oh, the wets are degrading super hard. There was a time where I'm pretty sure, like, almost the entire grid pitted onto the wet tires, and then, like, 2 laps later, the entire grid pitted again for slicks. And I'm like,
yeah, it was really weird.
Like, they just need an intermediate tire, and then none of this is that big of an issue. Like, yeah, there's still going to be people sliding around, but that's just rain. That's right. A race on a wet track. Like, people were sliding around with the wet tires on a wet track. But I was like, you can't just pit for new tires every 2 laps and be like, oh, it's going to rain. Oh, it's not going to rain. Oh, it's going to rain. Oh, it's not going to. And, like, back and forth. I thought
and
that
still
was
call
the more
competitive and not just, like, just trying to finish this damn thing.
Or just not just like, oh, who guessed right? Like they kept talking about one of the drivers. I think it was I think it was Will Power, and they kept being like, oh, Will, like he's taking the risk. He's coming in for wets while everyone else is out there on slicks, and then it's like, okay, like I mean, it's still raining. I don't know. It was interesting to watch for sure, because also I think if there had been that many incidents in an F1 race, like they probably would have just like ended the race. Like we saw the one where they did the half race points with George getting his first podium under safety car. I mean, much heavier rain than we saw in this.
Oh yeah, that was like a deluge around the longest, most treacherous track on the calendar.
They still went out and like drove some laps under safety car, and no one crashed under safety car.
No one crashed under safety car, but like just from a putting on a show perspective, like I always hear the phrase when engaging with some comedians' content where like they'll talk about an incident and the reply or the answer is, well, the show must go on, right? And it's this feeling of you are still putting on a show, and that is the undertone at all times, where it's like there must be and still must have been, and I don't care about these people's wallets, just understanding the thing that we're engaged with.
Right.
There must have been billions of dollars lost on that day for every company that has attached themselves to the sport in any way. Like, so it does not surprise me that they don't want to stop these things.
Oh, 100%. But it was a very interesting race. And like, I'm definitely getting more into IndyCar and like trying to follow certain drivers and all, like Colton Herta. I know I talked about how McLaren's giving him a testing opportunity and everything.
Yeah.
Like, he seems like a really good driver. Like that save on the drift that he had, I was like, I'm like, that is not something that everyone can do. Especially, and we know that because if you watched any of the rest of that IndyCar race, you probably, even if you watched 5 minutes, you probably saw 4 guys spin off into the grass in the infield of the track and all. So,
which, by the way, I think is one of the funniest things to see is these like incredibly honed machines that when
trying
they're
to creep out of the grass.
Yes. They like when they're on asphalt and like hard, solid ground, they are just the most dangerous fucking vehicles ever. But they get on this velvety, lush green grass and they're just like, they are literally a beached whale, and it's so
fucking
funny.
Baby deer with its legs.
Like, they like slide. You can. It's like it's almost like glassy, right? Oh, dude, it is pricelessly funny.
It was a riot, and I did like that. Well, and also just another weird. I did like that we didn't have situations where cars got beached and like we see in gravel and F1 and everything. But the other wild part was there were a couple of cars that got knocked around and hurt, like damaged really bad in incidents like that. They brought them back to the pit lane, let the car, like the teams work on them, and then sent them back out. Like they craned them to the pit lane, and these cars were able to still get sent back out. I was like, that is wacky. Like,
pretty interesting rule set though, where it's like, man,
super.
if you can get it back on the track, like you got it, man.
Well, the one guy ran out of fuel, and as he's coming down the pit lane, and his pit crew ran all the way down the pit lane, pushed him into the box, fueled him up, and they're like, "All right, get back out there, champ!" Like,
it honestly feels like in IndyCar, we're getting like intimations or these small incidents of like what I've heard like old Formula One heads talk about used to have happened in Formula One, and I'm like, that's kind of sick.
I watched highlights of, there was one race where I'm blanking on who it was in F1, but the driver's car like stopped about I don't know, 100 meters from the end on like a really hot day. He hopped out and he was trying to I think it was Nigel Mansell. And he hopped out. He's trying to push his car on his own to get it to the finish line. And he passed out from overheating and exhaustion and was granted like whatever position he was in when he passed out, was like given that as the final. I'm like, that was a wild west, like you tried to push your car and you passed out just to get it another 100 meters or whatever. They're like, you're good, you get sixth. It's fine.
That's like the Chuck Norris award, man. Just like totally pushing through. Holy hell.
Yeah, so definitely a cool experience. Very different from F1, but fun nonetheless. So it was a wet race, but entertaining. So
yeah, for sure. Well, cool. I'm glad I checked in on that because I was like, let me just check out the highlights. Maybe Aaron will want to talk about that. And boy, I'm glad I did. I was like, what the fuck,
dude?
Is this?
It was
like, this
wild.
Is a clown show, a literal clown fiesta.
So fun.
And
but
speaking of clown fiestas,
there we go. Great transition into MSI. We got League of Legends, ladies and gentlemen. Justin, I guess where did you want to start things off?
Well, okay, so I guess a good place to start would be, so I have notes from, I guess this would be the second round robin, where we talked a little bit about the first days of games, and then so I have notes on day 3, and then I think past that, we really got all the data we needed, and most of the other games just kind of fell in line after that, once we saw like, oh, okay, this is kind of the thing. But my point about Clown Fiesta is literally making RNG play the game, the like re-roll their games because of the ping. I thought that was kind of crazy, but at the same fucking time, let's not look at it in a vacuum. We have to look at it from the perspective of like, this is during the same year, the same era where other games, other tournament series were having issues solving the problem of teams wanting to not be on site.
Well, so in this instance, I will say my opinion on this, and I agree with Riot allowing RNG to play remotely due to circumstance. So obviously at last year's Worlds, and I think last year's MSI, the VCS teams were not able to make it from Vietnam and everything to play in those tournaments, and they were not given the opportunity to play on like remotely and all.
Right. So from a continuity perspective, it's kind of hurt. But not continuity. We know more now.
But you also have to think about this. MSI and Worlds last year were held in Reykjavik, Iceland.
Yeah.
VCS is in Vietnam, like down near South Korea. Like those like the ping that you would probably like. It's not like Riot is magically able to just give whatever ping that they want. They gave this like 35 ping or whatever to both sides with the RNG because, one, it's minor. Like if you had VCS play remotely last year at Worlds and MSI, they would be playing on 250 ping.
Right. And that's like, unplayable.
They are not remotely close in just physical distance to be able to have any sort of ping that's going to give any sort of competitive environment.
Right.
At least with 35 ping, it's not ideal. It's not what these players are used to and everything, but it is low enough that I think that you still have a decent bit of competitive integrity because China is so close to South Korea. Like, I think that a lot of people have blown this out as RNG was allowed to do it just because they're in the LPL and it's a major, like it's one of these major regions. They wouldn't do the same thing for VCS. If MSI and Worlds last year were held in South Korea, I am sure Riot would have allowed VCS to play remotely. I do not have any doubts in my mind that they would have been like, oh, you guys can't travel. Like, okay, let's figure out a solution. What I do have an issue with is the fact that Riot flubbed and just fucked up this whole ping situation. Like, to the point that the teams that were playing on location were having artificial ping that was created that was higher than what RNG was experiencing, like literally just directly connecting internet to South Korea. Like, that is where there's an issue. If you're going to do something like that, you gotta fucking test it, man. Like, you gotta have a foolproof system if you're going to bend these like rules and systems. Like, it's gotta be pretty foolproof. And they didn't do that. And that sucks. That feels bad.
The other big feels bad is the group 3 only having fucking 3 teams. Like, it didn't sound that bad at the inception, but watching it play out, literally just watching Order get
butt fucked by both the other teams every
not fun.
game.
Not fun at all. Not cool. Like, is there not a world where there's no other region you can call and just be like, hey, do you want to play? Like, there must have been a million teams and a million coaches that just fucking flipped their table. Like, we didn't get a call. We didn't fucking get a call. Like, they just go without a team. I think that, like, significantly kind of compromised the integrity of that group.
I mean, just looking at it, so on day... like at the start of MSI and everything, Order lost in 26 minutes in their first game. They lost in 38 minutes in their second game. So again, their first game against EG took 38 minutes. Next game against EG, 24 minutes. Game against G2, 24 minutes. Next game against EG, 23-minute loss. Next game against G2, 26-minute loss. Like, that is brutal. They were like, there should have been another, like, I don't know. There should have been another team in there that would have made it, like, at least something competitive. Like, there has to be a way to make some of these tournaments, even MSI, where you're only bringing one team, like, there has to be a way to make it more enjoyable, as opposed to seeing these teams from emerging regions, like, just hoping to get one win maybe off of someone, and otherwise getting, like, just beat down by RNG and T1 and G2. Like, G2 didn't have a game less than 26 and a half minutes against Order. Like, that's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
That is not fun or good for the mental of those teams to come in. Like, you see a lot more parity when you're seeing Saigon Buffalo and Detonation Focus Me, or like even like PSG and Istanbul Wildcats and everything. Like, you're seeing some parity a little bit.
Yeah, and even if there was one other team that would have been 2 other chances for Order to get games in and get
and 2 less games that they're getting stomped by NA and EU.
Right, people that they've already not been able to figure out. Like, it's just another nail in the coffin. So yeah, that was really tough. So those 2 things really hampered, I think, the success of the group stage. And overall made it kind of mad. The one thing that was very exciting was the PSG group and Wildcats group, where, like, there was a lot of parity in those games. Most of them could have went either way. I thought a lot of the draft solutions were really interesting in those games specifically. So yeah, some good stuff out of the groups though. Yeah.
And I did also appreciate that, like, RNG kind of took it as a challenge, that they were like, Riot was like, we gave you guys an unfair advantage, and they were like, this kind of sucks because it's nothing that we did. But then they're like, okay, like, we're just going to go in and stomp these games. Like, those were not close games that they had for the rematches.
No, it was literally just like 3 victory laps, which is hilarious, honestly, where like it was Riot trying to say like, oh, we just want to fix competitive integrity and
Yeah,
blah 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 blah.
maybe things would have shook out differently, and then
No,
boom,
no.
stomps.
It was just a chance for them to just fucking. It reminded me of the Monstar scene in Space Jam, where they just like roll up on the court, they shatter everything, break the rims, just dunking everywhere, and it's just like, okay, this. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, you Monstars.
Yeah. So I mean, I do also recognize that like even if there was a third team or a fourth team in that group C and everything, like there some of these things like with RNG and like with team order, it could have potentially not been better anyway. Like
Right.
team order, they could have very much ended up like team AZE and just gotten like kicked around like really, really hard in the majority of their games. Like at least in Group A, Detonation Focus Me, who ended with the same record as Team Order, like seemed to be more competitive throughout their games, just couldn't quite get over the hill. Like Team AZE just seemed to kind of get like beat down, except for their last matchup with DFM. So
yeah, definitely not ace in that occasion.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting MSI. I think there's a lot to talk about, like obviously since we've just been talking about all these things outside the actual gameplay. But in general, now we're going into the Rumble stage. We have the 6 teams that have moved on. We've got EG, G2, PSG Talon, RNG, Saigon Buffalo, and T1. I think we don't have to talk too much about the games that led here at this point because this is where we're at. What are your initial thoughts? I want to get just some thoughts, some not predictions, but just like maybe expectations going into this Rumble stage and all, with where we think teams might be and what we're looking forward to.
So the one thing that I think has emerged that we may see more of is the Callista pick. And that just as just a subtle like pick ban type thing, as we've seen the meta evolve, we've seen like some champs be a little bit better than others, and that's one that seems to have a lot of utility right now. Especially, I really liked it paired. It was an interesting strategy anyway, pairing it with the Diana to like throw the Diana in, get the Moonfall or whatever it is. So looking forward, just as like pick and bans, I think that may be one to key into. I'm interested to see how much that's going to continue and see if the teams are liking what Callista offers outside of the other popular 80 carries.
Yeah.
But
well, and being flexible too, because we did like you do see it in both top lane as well as the carry role. So
right. And I think there is a world where it could fill a similar role as a Lucian, where you're using that to like pseudo counterpick a melee top laner.
Yeah,
I don't
not
think
in the
it'll
mid
be
lane,
that great.
but yeah, not like a Lucian mid, but a Lucian top. Yeah,
Right.
I could imagine that coming out a bit.
So that's just speculative as far as the pick and bans go, but into the Rumble stage, as far as like the matchups, obviously T1 looks very strong, RNG looks very strong, but there's something exciting about the way G2 are playing. I really like the Caps, Yankos. I think who is it in the top lane? Broken Blade.
Yeah.
Broken Blade is honestly
He's
just a
performed
monster.
really well. Like I've been really impressed. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from him. Obviously he had left TSM and then was back over in the EU and everything. He's been a really standout good player for them.
Yeah, I agree. Both in the lane phase, I think some of his engages are just so creative, so on point. So I like him in the team, and I think he's going to be like a key to the game for G2. So what I think I'm looking forward to, interestingly enough, is the G2 defend their title storyline.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I think we're going to get a really good taste just on Friday on day one of the Rumble stage, because we have G2 playing both T1 and RNG on that first day.
Which are arguably their toughest opponents that they're getting to play right up front.
Yeah, so they get to play them just straight out right at the beginning. And then they will end up playing them again later on playing RNG the second time on day 3 and T1 on day 4. But I think in general, that's going to be a really couple of good games that I'm keeping an eye out on as well. But also day 2, we have the RNG T1 first matchup. And so that, of course, is going to be exciting. And then the last game of the Rumble stage is RNG T1 again. So that will be a nice way to close that out.
Yeah, and then we're obviously into the knockouts where we'll get up to the best of 3s and best of 5s. But what are some of the things that you're looking forward to here going into the Rumble stage?
Well, I think it's really just how the battle for that 4th spot kind of shakes out, because I think all of us are expecting T1, RNG, and G2 to kind of shake out to the top of the standings there. Only 4 teams, of course, are going to make it to the semifinals, make it out of the group stage and all. And so PSG Talent has shown some really quality signs of performance. They've played really solid games in the group stage against RNG. They haven't been able to obviously pull out wins, but after kind of slumping at the initial start or having a slow start to MSI, they really pulled out some really good performances. So I would not be surprised to see them be very competitive with EG for that last spot. And then Saigon Buffalo as well had some pretty good performances too. They ended up 4-2. I think DFM and Team AZE were both definitely a little below them in terms of their skill and everything. But I think this is really where we're going to get to see kind of how good they are, and see how that ends up. I think we're going to have a pretty contested fight for that 4th spot in the semifinals. Excuse me. And I think we're going to see the competitiveness between PSG, EG, and Saigon Buffalo, I think, be very close. And I would not be surprised if we end up with some tiebreakers between those 3 teams for that 4th spot going into the semifinals. That would not shock me whatsoever.
Yeah, and obviously, I think that's like what production hopes for, is that some of these teams break parity enough that they can artificially get more games by having these like tiebreaker scenarios. And that obviously is always exciting, because then you effectively get these like long form best of series out of these teams that you really just want to see them go toe to toe like all day.
Oh yeah.
I think this is really the stage of like most of the international tournaments where it gets like the most exciting. Obviously, we've talked about some elements of the group stage that has just been like kind of like in a movie, I would say, takes me out of the, suspended disbelief of the story. So yeah, just really looking forward to some better games here in the Rumble stage. Looking forward to see, now this is more in a vacuum, but I'm really looking forward to see how maybe not necessarily as a whole, but specifically, I want to see how JoJo stacks up against some of these other mid laners, and I want to see how Impact stacks up against some of these other top laners that are here at the tournament. Because it is, I think, as far as individual talent, I think it's a pretty stacked tournament. There's a lot of decent players, and if Evil Geniuses is able to get anything done in these Rumble games, it's going to be off the back of, I think, some quality JoJo play and some quality Impact play, with Danny arguably having to play flawlessly.
He just has to play like we know he's capable of. We've seen him perform really well, and he just seems to not be in his element. I think Vulcan has been doing what he can to be that playmaker for EG as well and try and set up stuff, and it just hasn't been working out. They've been a little too far behind in different areas. But I think their biggest key, because Impact, I don't think it matters what you throw Impact on. I think he's going to stack up fine against any of these other top laners. I don't think anyone in general is going to just put him in the blender or in the dumpster. I think the biggest key for me with EG is you have to get inspired on a strong early game pick that's going to be able to get advantages. You want him on the Lee Sin, you want him on the Viego, you want him on the Jarvan, the Xin Zhao. You want these aggressive, like, early game junglers that he's going to be able to push advantages and get after it. I think that's what you need for Inspired and for EG to pop off, because I think he has not been able to find his footing as well. And in games that he does, that's when EG looks really, really dominant. I think the other lanes all come together when he is on a comfortable pick and able to be making plays. So,
yeah, and especially the aggression tends to peters out, like depending on the team comp that they have. So, yeah, I think one of their keys to victory in this speaks to the early game picks, but I think they really succeed on aggression.
Yeah, and I think Inspired is a key. I think JoJo has performed fine. I think he is definitely a key now that we're into this stage of course, because you are going up now against Caps, against Faker, against Xiao, who you're going like, even for Vietnam, Froggy has put in some really decent and like solid performances. And so I think you are just kind of waiting to see if he can kind of pull that out, keep anything like that going. But I don't expect JoJo to be a detriment, but I think that I'm interested to see how he stacks up against some of this like really top international competition.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is his rookie year, correct?
JoJo, I believe so. I'll confirm.
Yeah, because like he has the
because he's young as hell.
Like he has the potential to make a really good showing in his
this is his
year.
Rookie year. He moved from the academy roster in November. So
let's just paint a picture here. NALCS was arguably as weak as it's ever been. Some of the like top talent teams were not up to snuff. Not saying that they got a bye. They got their own merit.
Well, they won in a very aggressively like good fashion.
Right.
Against an NA that was not its best. And that's not a knock to EG. Like they're not the ones who made the rest of NA worse. Like they just came out at the top of the pile. Like that's not a knock to them. It just so happens that that's the case. Like they did perform extremely well in playoffs and go on a tear. At the same time, the rest of NA just didn't look as good.
Right. And I guess I was using that to say, like, right time, right place for JoJo, because he is in a position where he was able to kind of, in a tough manner, easily bypass the North American LCS and put himself in a position to go up against the likes of Caps and Xiaohu and Faker and all of these guys that are just dominating the mid lane.
Yeah.
And I do think he has the hands to like put up some good performances against these players.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I guess that was my only point. Just like kind of like right time, right season for JoJo.
But also a really exciting opportunity too for him to be able to fall into this to some extent. I mean, he still had to play well to get there,
right?
But to end up in this position where he gets the opportunity to test his stuff against some of the best in the world, like that's pretty fucking cool for a rookie. That doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, I think that's more what we're getting
at. That's
like,
what I was getting from you. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, and what an opportunity it is to be in that position where like, oh, you just have the best team in North America and you get this, you get this shot.
Well, so, and hey,
that's pretty cool for.
I think even if he gets smacked by Xiaohu and by Faker, like, there's still growth that he's going to gain from this experience, international experience, and playing against Faker and Xiaohu. You're going to gain more knowledge than you're going to gain from playing against the bottom tier of the NALCS. Like, it's just a fact. Like, you're going to gain better experience from playing better players. And so it's a great opportunity for him, no matter how it shakes out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So yeah, a lot to look forward here for the Rumble stages, and hopefully the ping stays pretty low.
Yeah, so hopefully they've figured out that issue and everything can move forward and all, and not have any issues for the rest of the tournament. Definitely looking forward to that. But Justin, did you have any other notes on MSI or anything else you wanted to touch on before we head on to the flavor of the week and all?
No, I don't think so. The only other notes I have would be making fun of people. And we've had such a great pod up until this point that I don't want to get all negative. So hit me with your flavor of the week there, sir.
Sounds good. So for my food, I've got to say D'Alessandro's cheesesteaks. It's what Tyler, thank you for helping us move, even though I was sick. And also my dad helped out a bunch. So the two of them, we decided to treat them to cheesesteaks and all as a thank you, just a small thank you initially for helping us move. And D'Alessandro's, Colleen was saying it to me too. Cheesesteak, like, Philly has lots of good cheesesteaks, which is an awesome thing. And I know everyone has their favorite, but like, this was Colleen's first time having D'Alessandro's, and she was like, yeah, I understand why people really like this cheesesteak. Like, it's really good. It's got really good quality, like everything, the flavor, the juiciness, none of the steak's tough, like just stuff like that.
Sure.
Excuse me. She's like, really good cheesesteak. So even though she ordered mine wrong, we won't get to that. It's fine.
Oh my God. That's the biggest part about it too. It's not about the sandwich that you get. It's about the sandwich that you order.
It was funny. Me and Tyler were going to pick up the rest of my things from my place while Colleen and my dad kind of like moved and shifted stuff around here. And so Tyler texted her the cheesesteak order to put it in and all, texts her, and he's like, cheesesteak, blah, 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 like the toppings, whatever, comma, cheesesteak, this and this. She ordered all of that together as if it was one cheesesteak. And then she was like, well, what about Aaron? Okay, I'll just order an extra one of what I got so that we have 4 cheesesteaks. And it's like, girl,
Wait.
I'm not gonna try and figure out what happened.
No. So that means at some point she literally read it like, yeah. So let me get a cheesesteak with sauce, onions, and tomatoes, and a cheesesteak.
So it ended up being, she's like, so I want a cheesesteak with whiz, onions,
And a
American cheese, and mushrooms, and blah, like whatever else. And so the lady apparently on the phone was also like, whiz and American cheese, and she's like, that's what he wants.
Oh no, dude.
And so I took the monstrosity sandwich, and Tyler had the extra one that was more normal. And it was still a very good cheesesteak, but it was a riot. I was like, I don't know how you read that as one thing. There's a comma in between. It literally says cheesesteak, blah, 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 comma, cheesesteak, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Either
in
way.
the sender's defense, our phones have the option to hit enter and make a whole new thing. In the sender's defense, he should have done that. Or in the reader's defense. Yeah.
I get what you mean. That. But no, it's still very good cheesesteaks.
That's good.
And I got a good laugh out of that.
Yeah.
I'll go to my visual medium next. I jumped back into Naruto yesterday. It's been a while. It's one of those, I can't binge shows very well unless they're like, I can do like a season at a time. And so I've made my way back around, and I'm back into watching some Naruto and getting through that and the many, 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 many episodes. So I still have plenty. I'm sure this will happen again. But that is my visual medium. Music, I'm sure you're not too surprised, but it is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. I started getting some good actual quality listens to it over the past couple days, and so I have not listened to it as much as I want to really get. You can't listen to it once and just absorb it all. It's too much. I think that way with any music. I don't think that there's any quality album that you can listen to once and be like, I got it. Like, that's not how that works. Like, so far, just my initial impressions of it, and I think later on in the pod, like in a week or two, I want to get like a more well-rounded opinion formed. But for the meantime, for one, I really enjoy the vibe, and I love how the storytelling is. I love the back and forth that you get between Kendrick and the female character, and just a lot of this back and forth and tension and really kind of chaos that is going on in this relationship that you're seeing. And it builds a really cool environment and kind of story of these characters and these people that are involved. And I think that in a lot of people who have been through different difficult relationships and whatnot, I'm sure can take bits and pieces and see. I think that's like what I'm seeing so far, is there's that relatability that maybe not every song is going to touch some part of you that you've had and experienced and whatnot, but there's so much there that you can glean pieces of what's going on and kind of relate to it. And I think that that's a really impressive thing in music, when an artist is able to relate to a very large audience, even if it's in small bits and pieces, because those small bits and pieces pull people and draw people to listen and to look further into the content and all. In general, I like the sound and everything too. I'm not surprised it's Kendrick. He's one of my favorite artists. Like I'm not shocked that I enjoy the music aspect of it, but I have really enjoyed like the storytelling and the kind of wide range that this album seems to have through the different songs. So
interesting.
But yeah, so that's my my flavor of the week. But Justin, I'll let you get into yours.
Well, my flavor of the week, my music for my flavor of the week, obviously, is Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar. But now with what you've just said, I think I may just offer a couple of words here as well, because maybe we can save it for a larger discussion. We can go a little more in depth by the tracks. I think that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess because I gave you my initial opinion, like you already know what my like 2-3 listen opinion is, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna surprise you right now and say that was way wrong. I've listened to it way more since then, and I'm like, oh no, this has way more replayability than I originally thought.
So because you had said that when I had only listened to the first song on the album, really,
right?
And I like was listening and over the past couple of days, like I said, and I was like, yo, some of these songs, like I'm jammed.
They're so
like,
good.
N95 fucking slaps.
Yeah.
I'm like,
well, that's the thing. Like they're
song.
all really good, and the heavier stuff obviously comes towards the end. But then there's a very like uplifting finish. So I think the first listen through was just like really unexperienced, and I was like leaning a lot on that. But just from like an album and listenability, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, and I think that's where I'll stop here. I just want to kind of say like, yeah, I'm kind of with you. I enjoy it. Yeah. But when you have a couple more listens in, maybe next week we can re-explore it.
Yeah, next week, week after, somewhere in there,
sure.
I think we could definitely have some good conversation on it.
Because I do believe it is a project that would warrant a little more conversation, and understand I want to come at it from a fan perspective, not a critic perspective, right? Like, definitely. I just enjoyed it. So I want to talk more about it. We can hit that up later. So that's my music. I'm Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, like Aaron had said. My food for the week. Me and Sarah had decided the other night, she was like, let's not really cook. We haven't ordered out in a little bit. So she got a pepperoni pizza and some chicken fingers, and I got just like regular a 10-piece hot wing. And I have to say, it's just super pleasant to get just a good hot sauce, a well-cooked wing, like nothing weird, nothing crazy, just a good plate of wings. I really enjoy that experience. So that's my food here for the week. Got it from, I'm not going to say. And then my visual medium for the week, back into the MCU.
Okay.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2. We had finished up Doctor Strange. We have seen Civil War, so those are behind us. But now this was what we watched with the pizza and the wings. Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And this is the first one where we were clowning a little bit. At the end of it, we were kind of like, well, and then this, but. And so it was the first one that we were kind of like, all right, what does this do for the story? And then once we like critically put it against some of the other movies that like really, really give you like some of the big plot details, we were like, what does this do? We were like,
it was a 2. It was like, I really think that it's just purely the hit that Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was. And like the music and Chris Pratt and like all the Groot, I am Groot, and like all the stuff that they're like money. They saw the ching in the eyes and they were like, all right, like we can definitely milk this one.
But even like but even like Thor Dark World and Ragnarok, like, yes, they're sequels, but even in Thor 2, like, they were setting up one of the Infinity Stones in a way that made it very personal to one of the characters.
Much more regular of a hero, though. I think the Guardians of the Galaxy were this kind of like side quest that they were like
it felt like such a side quest. Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, like this was a hit. The first one was a hit. Let's just like give them some extra content. Like that's how it seemed to me when I watched it. Like entertaining, but just not in the scheme of the Marvel universe and everything. Like not as valuable of a content. So, and
in my opinion, pretty much entirely skippable. It it does a little bit of the one argument that we were able to make for it was it does set up the Gamora Nebula relationship a little bit, but other than that, we were like, this is fucking skippable. Honestly,
yeah, that could have been done better in the first movie, and then you just don't need the second movie.
Yeah, fair enough, man. So that's been the first one that we were kind of like meh on, but interested to move forward. Yeah. But that's my flavor of the week here. Take us out of here, Aaron.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Of course, you can always find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify. Check us out on YouTube. You can see our smiling faces and my new just environment here. We really appreciate everyone being here with us, taking the time to join us for this fun adventure that we have each week. So thank you all, and we're looking forward to all of our future episodes with you all listening in.
Yeah, new episodes every Thursday. Like you said, Google, Spotify, YouTube. Check it out. Let us know what your flavor of the week is. Put it down in the comments what your rose, thorn, and seed was. Other than that, just thank you so much for spending your time with us here. We super appreciate it. This has been another Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everyone.
Later.